The morning sun spilled across the Blue Ridge Hills when a former Marine named Evan Cole saw something that shattered the quiet of his grief. A young boy weeping at his late wife's grave. His loyal German shepherd, Scout, growled low, as if recognizing a truth Evan could not yet see. Moments later, a man in a dark coat appeared, his smile too perfect, his words too smooth. And when the boy looked up, Evan saw his own eyes staring back. From that instant, the peace he'd built around his pain began to crumble, revealing a secret. The morning sun rose over the Blue Ridge Mountains, washing the old cemetery in golden silence. Evan Cole stood before his wife's grave, the stone smooth under his fingers, her name catching the light like a whispered memory. Beside him, Scout, the big German shepherd with the sable coat of silver and black, sat quietly, ears twitching at every bird call. For 3 years, Evan had come here on the same date, the anniversary of the day he lost Lily. But this morning felt different. Scout suddenly rose, his muscles tightening, and gave a low growl. Evan followed his gaze and saw a boy, no more than 7, kneeling by Lily's grave. His small shoulders shook, his dark brown hair glimmered with dew, and in his trembling hands was a single white rose. Evan's chest tightened. The boy didn't seem lost. He seemed drawn there, like he belonged. When Evan called out softly, the child turned, revealing hazel eyes that mirrored his own. Before Evan could speak, a tall man in a black coat appeared through the mist, his silver hair slicked back, his voice smooth as oil. "Aiden," the man said gently. "Time to go." The boy looked from Evan to the stranger, uncertainty flickering between them. Scout stood rigid, growling again. Evan felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. As the man led the boy away, the dog barked once, sharp and warning. The sound echoed through the valley, leaving Evan alone with a chill he couldn't name and the feeling that his past had just turned to look back at him. That night, the storm rolled in, the kind that rattled windows and stirred ghosts from the corners of old memories. Evan sat at his desk, a half-empty glass beside him, Scout lying at his feet. His eyes wandered over the shelves Lily used to fill with her favorite poetry books. One volume, a worn leather-bound copy of Leaves of Grass, sat slightly ajar. When he reached for it, the book felt heavier than it should. Tucked inside was a photograph, Lily smiling, her hair lit by the same sun that now refused to visit. In her arms, a newborn child. Behind it, an old key taped to the page. Evan froze. The handwriting on the back was hers. "For when you need the truth." Scout stirred, sensing the shift in his master's heartbeat. Evan found himself driving through the rain to the Willow Creek Credit Union where Lily once worked. The key fit a safety deposit box marked under her maiden name. Inside was a single envelope, a birth certificate, and a letter written in Lily's delicate cursive. The name on the paper stopped his breath, Aiden Evan Cole. The letter spoke of a child hidden to protect him and of a man named Victor Hale who had promised safety but brought fear instead. Evan read it again, the storm raging louder outside, and realized the boy at the grave wasn't a stranger. He was his son. Evan spent the next day combing through every record he could find about Victor Hale and his so-called charity, Green Haven Foundation. The public saw him as a saint, a man rescuing children from broken homes. But behind the photos and newspaper smiles, something felt wrong. Scout sat by Evan's chair as he called an old friend, Noah Park, a private investigator who owed him from their time in service. Noah's voice crackled through the line. "You're not the first to ask about Hale," he said grimly. "The guy's clean on paper but off the record. I've got whispers of child placements for profit." Evan clenched his jaw, staring at Lily's photo. "He has my son," he said quietly. Scout looked up at him, amber eyes steady and knowing. That night, they drove to Asheville, parking outside a gated property hidden behind trees and stone. Lights burned inside the mansion like eyes in the dark. Evan adjusted his jacket, checked his sidearm, a habit he hadn't forgotten. "Stay close," he told Scout. Together they moved through the shadows, soldier and dog once more. Somewhere inside, a man who'd stolen everything he loved was sipping wine behind locked glass. The night air was sharp, electric with tension. Noah's van hummed softly nearby as he fed Evan the layout of Hale's estate through a small earpiece. "Security cameras on a 30-second loop," Noah whispered. "You've got one blind spot near the study." Evan nodded silently. Scout padded beside him, low to the ground, his sable fur blending with the dark. They crossed the garden, the scent of roses mixing with the hum of generators. Evan's heart beat steady, military rhythm. He slipped through a window, landing silently in a dim corridor lined with portraits of smiling children. His stomach turned. In the office, files lay scattered on a desk, folders marked with numbers, not names. One read Aiden E. Cole. Evan snapped photos with his phone just as Scout's ears flicked toward the hall. Footsteps. He hid behind a curtain as Hale entered, humming softly, unaware. Evan caught a glimpse of a small silver locket in the man's hand, the same one Lily had worn. Fury burned through him, but he waited, breathing through the storm in his chest. When Hale left, Evan and Scout slipped back into the night, hearts pounding. They had what they needed. Now, the world would see who Victor Hale truly was. The courthouse in Asheville stood like a monument to judgment, columns of pale stone washed in the white light of morning, its steps worn smooth by 1,000 stories of guilt and redemption. Inside, the air was tense, thick with the scent of paper, ink, and anticipation. Evan Cole sat straight-backed at the prosecution table, his eyes hollow yet unwavering. Scout lay at his feet, massive head resting on his paws, his amber eyes watching everything with quiet intelligence, as if he understood the gravity of human justice. Across the room, Victor Hale looked immaculate. His silver hair was perfectly combed, his charcoal suit flawless. He smiled for the cameras that had been allowed in for the opening statement, a smile that could charm donors but no longer hid the rot behind it. When the trial began, the world he had built with lies started to unravel thread by thread. The prosecutor laid out the evidence Evan and Noah had uncovered: financial records, altered adoption papers, letters from grieving families, and most damning of all, Lily's final words. Her letter was read aloud, her voice trembling through time, speaking of fear, hope, and a husband she had trusted to find the truth when she could not. Evan closed his eyes as the courtroom fell silent. He could almost feel her hand in his again. Hale's attorney was ruthless, painting Evan as a broken man, a soldier unhinged by war and grief, a vigilante who blurred the lines between justice and vengeance. "This man broke into my client's private property," he declared, pacing like a predator before the jury. "He fabricated evidence to feed a delusion. He cannot even prove this child is his." But then, the prosecutor held up the birth certificate, the DNA test results, the trail of bank accounts Hale used to move children like merchandise. Piece by piece, the mask crumbled. Hale's calm smile twisted into something feral, a man cornered by his own arrogance. When the verdict came, guilty on all charges, there was no applause, only the heavy sound of breath being released all at once. Evan didn't celebrate. He just sat there, staring at the man who had stolen his family, and felt a quiet, burning sorrow instead of triumph. Scout pressed his muzzle against Evan's hand, grounding him in the present. The war was not over, but for the first time in years, the enemy had a face, and it was finally falling. Spring in the Blue Ridge Mountains came softly, like an apology whispered through the pines. Mist rose from the valleys at dawn, curling around the cabin where Evan now lived, not as a ghost, but as a man learning to breathe again. The trial was behind him, yet the real battle, the one for his son's heart, had only begun. Aiden had been living with a foster family since Hale's arrest. The first meeting was tentative. A small, bright room at the county center, colored drawings on the walls, a table too small for a man like Evan, who had carried rifles heavier than this child's life. When the door opened and Aiden entered holding a social worker's hand, the air left Evan's lungs. The boy had grown thinner, quieter, but his hazel eyes were the same, Lily's eyes. He hesitated until Scout padded in, tail low, gaze gentle. The dog simply lay down and sighed, patient as a mountain. Aiden's fear cracked. He knelt, touched Scout's fur, and whispered something soft that made the dog's tail thump once against the floor. That was how it began. The bridge between father and son, built not by words, but by loyalty. Weeks passed. At the cabin, life unfolded in quiet gestures. Evan cooked pancakes in the mornings. Aiden learned to chop firewood. They hiked trails Lily once loved, Scout always between them, a guardian and a witness. At night, they sat by the hearth, firelight painting their faces gold. Sometimes Aiden would fall asleep against his father's arm, and Evan would stay awake just to listen to the rhythm of his breathing, the sound of a future he thought he'd lost. One warm May morning, Evan took Aiden to the cemetery. The grass was green again, dotted with wild daisies. Together, they placed flowers on Lily's grave. "She would have loved you," Evan said, his voice steady but thick with feeling. Aiden looked up, eyes shining. "I think she does," he whispered. Scout lay beside them, head on his paws, tail brushing the grass. The wind carried birdsong through the trees, and in that gentle silence, Evan felt something he hadn't in years: peace. Not the kind found in solitude, but the kind that comes when love, loss, and forgiveness finally learn to share the same sky. The war inside him was over. The mountain air was alive again, and in it, a new melody began to play, the laughter of his son, and the soft bark of a dog who had never once stopped believing they'd find their way home.